Sometimes life doesn't push you forward, it just locks a door and waits. That's exactly what happened to Lena Carter. She wasn't trying to change the world. She only wanted to belong in Itchnet to create something beautiful, something that mattered. At 25, she worked quietly behind the scenes at Eclipse Atelier, a high-profile design studio tucked in the restless heart of Brooklyn. Her job was safe, small, structured, but her heart had always wandered beyond the edges of her role. She'd stay late, sketching silhouettes no one had asked for, not because she had to, but because something inside her whispered that she could offer more. And yet, that kind of hope doesn't always make you friends. It was one of those evenings when even the air feels tired. Her boss had barked orders all day. Deadlines blurred into cold coffee and blank stares. By the time Lena packed up, the office was nearly dark, the kind of dark that makes you wonder if you've stayed too long chasing something no one else believes in. She walked home, one slow breath at a time, craving the silence of her apartment, the soft hum of her kettle, the stillness. But when she reached her building, a blinking red light met her at the door. System error. No access. Please contact building management. Just like that, her home disappeared behind a screen. No key, no code, no way in, only the quiet echo of her footsteps and the soft ache in her chest. She considered sleeping in the lobby, but the idea felt too much like giving up. And Lena had already given up too many times before. Then she remembered him, the man from 9C. She didn't know his name, only the shape of him always in a crisp jacket, briefcase in hand, eyes full of somewhere else. They'd crossed paths twice, maybe 3 times, once in the elevator, once by the mailboxes, but he hadn't looked away the way others did, and sometimes that's enough. So she walked up 12 floors with hope and hesitation in her throat, and she knocked, not because she was sure he'd help, but because when the world locks you out, even a stranger's kindness can feel like home. That night, Lena would meet Julian Reeves not as neighbors, not as strangers, but as two people on opposite sides of their own walls, quietly asking the same question. Can I trust someone with the softer parts of me? But before that door opened, there was another she'd been knocking on for years. At the office, Lena's quiet brilliance didn't shine the way loud ambition did. While others climbed ladders built on applause, she built dreams on scraps of fabric and long nights. That day she'd finally put pencil to paper, sketching a dress for the upcoming spring, line bold, delicate, and entirely hers. She wasn't trying to steal credit, just share something she believed in. But before she could finish the final details, a voice sliced through her focus. Lena, this isn't what I asked for. Her manager, Janice Thornton, stood over her desk with a look that made the room feel smaller. I needed the sales deck, not whatever this is, she said, gesturing toward the sketch, like it was a mess someone forgot to clean up. I completed the report, Lena said softly. This was just an idea, something that you're not paid to have ideas. You're paid to execute mine. Across the room, a coworker chuckled under her breath. Natalie Green, sharp heels, sharper tongue. Maybe stick to stapling reports next time, Lena. And Lena? She said nothing, not because she agreed, but because she'd learned that not every fight is worth picking, especially when your heart is already tired from carrying what no one else can see. The office had long emptied, leaving only the quiet hum of distant traffic and the echo of her own breath. Lena packed her things slowly, her manager's harsh words still ringing in her ears like a song stuck on the wrong note. She told herself not to take it personally, but some wounds, no matter how familiar, still sting. Outside, the night had a chill to it, the kind that made you tuck your hands deeper into your coat and walk a little faster. Just as she stepped into the open air, her phone buzzed. She hoped for a message from a friend, A kind word. Anything. But it wasn't that. It was worse. Due to a system upgrade, the electronic locks in your building are temporarily offline. Repairs will begin tomorrow. Please make alternate arrangements for the night. She stopped in her tracks. Alternate arrangements? What arrangements? She checked her bag again, hands trembling slightly, then her keychain, as if the answer might be hiding in a pocket she'd missed. But the spare was inside, and the door sealed tight. A hotel wasn't an option. Her paycheck, stretched thin by Brooklyn rent, didn't leave room for that kind of emergency. And her friends? They lived scattered across the city, hours away by slow buses and sleepy subway lines. She didn't have the strength to chase comfort tonight, so she walked home anyway, back to the building she couldn't enter. The lobby was empty, sterile in its silence. The night guard gave her a tired shrug. System's down. Nothing I can do. She stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with her body, her bags, her disappointment. One night, she whispered to herself, but it wasn't the night that scared her. It was the weight of this night, heavy, lonely, and already too long. And then, a flicker of memory. A face. The neighbor from 9C. She didn't know his name. Just the way his shoulders squared in his suit, the soft click of his polished shoes. How he once held the elevator without being asked. His eyes had something quiet in them, something observant, sharp, but not cold. Maybe he'd let her stay. Just for the night, just until morning, returned her a way in. It was a long shot, and Lena didn't like asking for help. But tonight had stripped her of pride, and all she had left was hope. She took the elevator up, her fingers trembling as she pressed the button. Her heart beat louder with each passing floor. At 9C, she stood in front of a dark wood door, the faintest golden light spilling from beneath it. She hesitated, then knocked. Footsteps on hardwood, the sound of a lock turning. The door opened, and there he was. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a living room. Rolled up sleeves, crisp white shirt, collar undone just enough to feel real, his hair slightly tousled, like he'd just run a hand through it. Eyes sharp, just like she remembered. He took her in quietly, not suspicious, just curious. "Can I help you?" She swallowed. "Hi, I'm Lena, from 9A. I know we've only seen each other in passing, but my apartment's locked. The building system is down, and I have nowhere else to go tonight." She forced a small, awkward smile. "Would it be okay if I stayed here, just for the night? I can pay you, or help with cleaning, or, I don't know. I just didn't know where else to turn." He leaned on the doorframe, gaze steady. "You're asking to stay at a stranger's place. That's bold." Her cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "We've seen each other. That has to count for something. I'm really sorry I wouldn't ask if I wasn't..." "Desperate?" he offered gently. She nodded. He studied her for a beat longer, then stepped aside. "One night," he said. "But you're making dinner. Deal?" A wave of relief rushed through her so quickly she could have cried. Deal. His apartment looked like a magazine cover glass, chrome, open space, and skyline views. She didn't belong there. But he didn't make her feel small, just present. "I'm starving," he said casually, tossing her an apron, "and I refuse to order takeout again. Make something that won't kill me." She laughed, nerves bubbling. "No pressure at all, huh?" She dug through his fridge, finding eggs, bread, and some vegetables. Not much, but enough, maybe. Cooking wasn't her strong suit. That honor went to designing, not dicing. But she tried. She cracked eggs into the pan, and the oil popped in protest. Smoke rose faster than she expected. She fanned it with a towel, eyes wide. Oh no. He appeared beside her, one brow raised and a smirk tugging at his lips. Planning to burn down my kitchen? It's under control, she muttered. Sort of. He took the spatula from her hand and flipped the eggs like it was second nature. Maybe just stick to chopping for now. And just like that, the tension thinned. The room warmed, and Lena, locked out of her apartment, felt strangely like she'd stumbled into something quietly extraordinary. They sat side by side at the kitchen island, a pair of mismatched omelets cooling between them. The eggs were a little too brown, the edges slightly crisped, but neither of them seemed to mind. After a long day, even a flawed dinner shared in silence could feel like comfort. Lena fidgeted with her napkin, her fingers still tacky with egg yolk. She glanced up, cheeks pink. Mind if I wash up? Julian nodded, casually gesturing down the hall. Bathroom's the second door on the left. Try not to get lost. She gave a soft laugh, grabbed her tote, and headed toward the hallway. She hadn't noticed before just how spacious his apartment was. High ceilings, cool marble floors, art pieces that looked too thoughtful to be decorative. Everything felt curated, deliberate, yet not cold. It told a story, one she hadn't been invited to read, not yet. Counting doors as she walked, Lena's thoughts drifted, maybe to the awkwardness of showing up on his doorstep, maybe to how surprisingly kind he'd been, or maybe to the way he looked at her, not like a burden, but like a puzzle he didn't mind figuring out. She opened a door and stepped inside, then froze. Steam rolled out like breath from a dragon, curling around her like fog. Behind a frosted glass panel stood Julian in the shower, unaware, unbothered, entirely too real. Her heart lurched to her throat. She gasped, wide-eyed. Oh my God! She slammed the door, hands flying to her face, her skin now burning for an entirely new reason. Wrong room. Very, very wrong room. Mortified, she dashed back to the kitchen and dove into the nearest safe activity, scrubbing dishes like her life depended on it. Moments later, footsteps echoed down the hall. Julian entered, hair damp, fresh shirt pulled over broad shoulders, and the smallest smirk tugging at his lips. Didn't expect company in the shower, he said, casually toweling his hair. Lena buried her face in her hands. I am so sorry. I thought it was the bathroom. I didn't see anything. I swear. His laugh was easy, not mocking, not cruel, just warm. It's okay. Happens more often than you think. He paused, grinning. Well, not exactly like that, but close. She peeked through her fingers, cheeks still aflame. You're disturbingly calm about this. He shrugged. Life's full of accidents. No point wasting time being embarrassed about the harmless ones. Something about his tone, unshaken, gentle, made the tension in her shoulders dissolve. They returned to their seats, omelets now lukewarm, but the air between them lighter somehow. He looked at her with quiet curiosity. So, what's your story, Lena? She hesitated. Then let the words come out, slow but true. I work at Eclipse Atelier. I'm a designer, technically, but I think they'd prefer if I just followed orders and kept my head down. Let me guess, he said. You had the nerve to think creatively. She nodded. I pitched something new. My boss acted like I'd committed a crime. Julian leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Sounds like she's intimidated. People who can't do what you do often hate you for trying. Lena blinked, taken aback. It wasn't just what he said, it was how easily he saw through it. Through her. Thanks, she said quietly. That actually helps. As they cleared the dishes, Lena's phone buzzed on the counter. A new message from her manager lit up the screen. Revised sketches. On my desk by 8 a.m. No excuses. She stared at it a moment, lips pressed into a thin line. Julian caught her expression. More chaos? She sighed. More expectations. Less time. Story of my life. He tilted his head down the hallway. Guest room's yours tonight. You look like someone who hasn't exhaled in days. A small, grateful smile tugged at her lips. You sure? I wouldn't offer if I wasn't. As she settled into the unfamiliar softness of a stranger's guest bed, her mind should have been spinning with anxiety deadlines, mistakes, tomorrow's demands. But instead, it lingered on a different image entirely. The blurred silhouette behind a wall of steam. She fell asleep not knowing what any of this meant, only that for the first time in a long while, someone had seen her stumble and hadn't turned away. The next morning, Lena found herself wrapped in the scent of freshly brewed coffee. It crept into the guest room like a gentle invitation. She blinked against the morning light spilling through tall windows, stretched, and sat up still in yesterday's clothes, but wrapped in a quiet sense of safety she couldn't explain. She walked into the kitchen, where Julian was already pouring 2 mugs. His hair was still damp from a shower, his sleeves rolled casually up. Sleep okay? He asked, handing her a mug without a second thought. Surprisingly well, she said, taking it. Then, more hesitantly, the building's management just emailed. The lock system's going to be down for another 2 days. He didn't even blink. Then stay. Just don't set off the smoke alarm again. She laughed, easing into the chair by the counter. No promises, but I'll try. Determined to make herself useful, she offered to cook dinner again that night. Julian raised an eyebrow, clearly remembering the eggs, but didn't argue. Lena sifted through his pantry and landed on grilled cheese sandwiches. Safe, simple, hard to ruin. As she melted the butter and pressed slices of bread into the skillet, she noticed him leaning casually against the counter, arms folded, watching her with quiet amusement. You're really going for redemption, huh? He teased. She grinned. I refuse to be remembered for almost burning down your kitchen. They ate by the window, where the city glowed like a living thing. Skyscrapers shimmered under twilight, and silence stretched comfortably between them until Julian finally spoke. So, he said, this boss you mentioned? The one who acts like your creativity is an offense? Lena took a slow breath. Her name's Janice. I brought her a new design idea yesterday, something I really believed in. She treated it like a betrayal. She paused. And there's another woman at the office, Natalie. She's always watching, waiting for me to slip. Julian listened, without interrupting, his eyes calm, focused. Sounds like you're surrounded by people who feel threatened just because you see the world differently, he said. Keep going. People like that either grow or crack. The words landed somewhere deep in her chest, not because they were new, but because for once someone said them and meant them. Thanks, she murmured. You're better at this than I expected. He smiled. You'd be surprised what people pick up when no one's listening to them either. The next day, Lena returned to Eclipse Atelier with a folder full of revised sketches and a heart still aching from the weight of invisibility. The office buzzed with noise, but the moment she stepped inside, it dimmed, as if tension could be scented in the air. Natalie sat at her desk, swirling coffee and smirking. Nice of you to show up, Lena. Hope those sketches are actually yours this time. Lena said nothing. She simply walked over to Janice's desk and laid the folder down. They're ready. Original. For the client. Janice barely glanced at her. They better be. I'm not here to clean up amateur mistakes. The comment stung, but just for a second. Then Lena remembered last night's words. They either adapt or they break. She returned to her seat, buried in work until her eyes blurred and her back ached. By the time she left the office, the sun had already disappeared behind buildings, and her body felt like it was made of stone. When she arrived back at Julian's, he was pacing in the living room, finishing up a call. I don't care about the excuses, he said, voice clipped. I want a full update by tomorrow. No compromises. Then he saw her. His expression softened instantly. Rough day? She dropped onto the couch like a stone. Let's just say the war's ongoing, and I'm down to a butter knife. He sat beside her, quiet for a moment, then gently, "You're tougher than you think. Don't let small people make you feel small." She looked over at him, a little surprised. "You sound like someone who's had to fight for their own voice, too." He didn't answer directly, just gave a small shrug. "Let's just say, I know what it's like to be underestimated." That evening, Lena needed to breathe. So she suggested they go for a walk somewhere warm, cozy, somewhere she didn't have to feel like she was proving anything. They ended up at a tucked-away coffee shop, dimly lit with fairy lights, strung across wooden beams. The smell of cinnamon and espresso curled around them like an old song. Lena ordered something with too many ingredients and a little too much liquor. Julian stuck with black coffee, no sugar. She sipped, sighed, and let her guard down. One drink turned into two, and two into soft laughter. "You're awfully quiet," she said, leaning forward just slightly. "I thought you'd be more intimidating." He raised an eyebrow. "Disappointed?" She smiled, loose from the wine and the warmth. "No, just surprised. I like talking to you." And before she could stop herself, or maybe because she didn't want to, she leaned in. Julian caught her shoulders gently, steadying her. "Lena, you're not thinking straight." Her cheeks flushed, reality rushing back like cold wind. "Oh, God, I'm sorry. That was, that wasn't," but he just shook his head softly. "It's okay. Let's not do anything we'd regret because of a strong latte." They walked home in silence, the buzz fading, replaced by the sound of gravel under their shoes. At the apartment, he handed her a blanket, a bottle of water, and a smile that didn't judge. "Get some sleep. We'll pretend tonight never happened. Or we'll laugh about it tomorrow." Lena nodded, her heart racing for all the wrong reasons. Then, for the first time in a long while, she let herself rest not just her body, but the version of herself that always had to be strong, clever, and untouched. Because sometimes, the most healing thing isn't falling in love. It's being allowed to be human in front of someone and still be safe. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Lena's words trailed off, her cheeks burning, the streetlight casting a soft glow over her embarrassment. But Julian just shook his head gently, his voice low and calm. "It's okay. Let's not let one blurry night rewrite something that's still unfolding." Back at the apartment, he handed her a glass of water and a folded blanket. No lectures, no awkwardness, just quiet kindness. "Get some sleep," he said, voice warm like dusk. "We'll laugh about this tomorrow." Lena could only nod, mortified but strangely grateful. It had been a long time since someone handled her mistakes with grace instead of judgment. The next morning arrived slowly, golden light pouring through the windows like honey. She blinked against the headache and the blur of last night's memories. Toast popped in the kitchen. Julian was moving around like nothing had happened. She patted in, still half asleep. "About last night?" He glanced over, unfazed. "Don't worry. Just don't make a habit of kissing strangers." She laughed, the tension cracking like morning ice. Noted. They shared breakfast in easy silence, and somewhere between toast and coffee, something quiet shifted the kind of trust that doesn't need words to announce its arrival. But comfort never lingers long when the world keeps pulling at your edges. Back at work, the calm shattered. In the break room, Natalie stood by the coffee machine, holding up one of Lena's designs like it was evidence in a trial. "I found this in the shared folder. Weird how it looks, exactly like what you pitched last week. Got anything to say for yourself?" Lena's stomach dropped. "That's my work. I created it. Last month." Natalie tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Then prove it. Because Janice wants a full rewrite by morning." or you're done. The air closed in. But then she remembered Julian's words. Keep going. They either adapt or they break. That night, Lena returned to the only place she felt steady Julian's. She sat cross-legged on his couch, laptop open, sleeves rolled up. Her fingers moved fast, redrawing lines she'd already drawn 100 times before, this time not for approval, but for truth. Julian passed behind her, slowing his steps. You've been at that for hours. She didn't look up. I have to redo everything. They're trying to say I stole my own work. He leaned on the doorframe, arms folded. You'll show them? People like you? You shine, whether they want to see it or not. His words wrapped around her like armor. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to help her keep breathing. The next evening, he suggested a walk. Something simple. Trees, air, space. They wandered through a quiet park, not far from his place. Eucalyptus trees whispered overhead, and fallen leaves crackled beneath their feet. The city, for once, felt far away. Lena slowed, her voice barely above the breeze. My dad built a small business from nothing, she said. When he passed, my mom unraveled, and now she's in a coma. Julian said nothing. She continued. My stepdad and his daughter took what was left, house, savings, everything, said it wasn't mine, and just like that, I was out, alone. I've been clawing my way back ever since. He finally spoke, his voice low. That's a lot, Lena, but you're still here, still standing. That counts for more than you know. She looked up at him. And you? What's your story? He paused, as if weighing what to reveal. I'm just someone trying to protect what matters. That's all. His phone buzzed. Another work call. He stepped away, his voice fading into the distance, leaving Lena staring at the sky, wondering what he wasn't saying. Later that night, back on his couch, she curled up with her laptop still open, deadlines looming, the battle unfinished. But for the first time in years, she felt safe. Not because the world had changed, but because someone had finally chosen to stay. The next morning, Lena stood in the elevator of Eclipse Atelier, clutching her newly revised portfolio, like it was the last piece of herself she still controlled. Outside, the city buzzed, but inside the glass-walled office, silence stretched thick and judgmental. She'd spent all night pouring herself into those sketches, redrawing not just lines, but belief in her ideas, her instincts, her worth. She could hear Natalie whispering to Janice near the reception desk. Words like dishonest, unprofessional, liability. Her heart pounded, but she kept walking. When the elevator doors opened, Lena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the fire. Lena placed the folder gently on Janice's desk, the sketches she'd redone overnight, now bound with quiet resolve. I've made the revisions, she said, steady but not without strain. Janice barely looked up. Let's hope they're worth my time. We don't reward shortcuts here. From across the room, Natalie twirled a pen between her fingers, a smirk tugging at her mouth. Careful, Lena. Plagiarism's a tricky thing to explain. Before Lena could answer, her phone vibrated. A message from Julian lit up the screen. Big meeting tonight. Want to come? Embarcadero Restaurant. Might be a good distraction. She hesitated. The idea of leaving work politics behind even for an evening felt like a lifeline. She typed back quickly. Sure. Thanks for thinking of me. The day dragged like wet fabric. Janice piled on extra work. Natalie dropped barbed comments in passing, each one meant to unravel her piece by piece. But Lena didn't fold. By 5, she was drained, but not defeated. She returned to Julian's apartment, grabbed a spare dress from her overnight bag, a simple black one. She'd nearly donated last month and changed quickly. When she walked into the living room, Julian was already waiting, sharp in a tailored suit that made her pause. You clean up well? She teased. He smiled. You're not so bad yourself. Ready? The restaurant was tucked along the waterfront, where candlelight flickered against glass walls and laughter hummed beneath soft jazz. Lena felt slightly out of place among the tailored suits and wine lists. But Julian guided her with quiet ease to a private table. Waiting there was a woman in a scarlet dress, poised, polished, and watching them with a gaze too sharp to be friendly. This is Victoria Lane, Julian said. She's a partner on one of our current projects. Victoria smiled thinly, then turned her attention to Lena. And you are? Lena Carter, she replied, offering her hand. Just joining Julian tonight. Victoria's lips twitched. The neighbor. I heard you're temporarily staying with him. How quaint. Lena's cheeks burned, but Julian cut in smoothly, his voice cool. Lena's my guest, Victoria. Let's keep this conversation professional. Victoria laughed lightly, but her eyes didn't soften. Trouble lingered in the curve of her smile. Dinner blurred into small talk and shallow praise. Lena tried to follow the flow, but Victoria controlled the current name-dropping meetings, referencing shared history with Julian, drawing the spotlight away from Lena with practiced precision. When dessert arrived, the attack came dressed as curiosity. So Lena, Victoria leaned closer, voice low. What's it like living off someone else's generosity? No rent, no pressure. Must be a lovely arrangement. Lena froze, her hand clenched around her fork. She didn't raise her voice, but her words didn't need volume to carry weight. I'm not living off anyone. I'm simply waiting for the locks in my building to be fixed. That's it. Julian set down his glass, jaw tight. That's enough, Victoria. Lena's here because I want her here. The table fell silent. Victoria stood, offered a brittle smile, and excused herself. Lena exhaled slowly, her body still humming with discomfort. Thank you, she whispered. Julian gave a small nod. She crossed a line. You okay? She managed a faint smile, not used to being in the spotlight. The next day, the storm returned, this time louder, crueler. Lena entered the conference room and stopped cold. Natalie stood confidently at the front, presenting a design nearly identical to Lena's, the one she'd sketched late into the night, the one she thought had finally captured her voice. This is my concept, Natalie said, pointing at the screen. Lena must have seen it in the shared folder. I don't know what happened, but the resemblance is concerning. Lena's heart pounded. Her hands trembled, but she stood. That design is mine, she said, her voice trembling, but true. I drew it weeks ago. I can show you the drafts, the timestamps, everything. Janice narrowed her eyes. If you can't prove that, Lena, we have a serious problem. The room buzzed with murmurs, judgment, doubt. Lena opened her laptop, hands shaking, ready to pull up the files, but Natalie interrupted, her voice sweet and venomous. Why even bother? Everyone knows you're desperate to be noticed. What's a little shortcut? Lena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, rage and fear warring inside her. She wasn't just fighting for a sketch. She was fighting for the right to be taken seriously, to exist without apology. Then, something unexpected happened. The tension in the room was thick, brittle, like a thread pulled too tight. Lena stood with her laptop open, her pulse loud in her ears. She was seconds away from defending her name, her work, her worth alone. Then the conference room door opened, and everything stopped. Julian walked in like the air belonged to him, not out of arrogance, but gravity. Conversations stilled, heads turned, the kind of silence that falls when someone important enters, and no one's sure what to say. Janice, caught off guard, straightened instantly. Mr. Reeves, we weren't expecting you. Julian's gaze moved slowly across the room, not scanning but seeing, and when his eyes found Lena, something shifted. steady, certain. I heard there was a question about originality, he said. Let's settle it. Behind him stepped a woman in a navy blazer, tablet in hand, calm and precise. This is Sarah from HR, Julian continued. She's reviewed the project files, including metadata, edit logs, and version history. He paused just long enough for the silence to tighten. Lena's design predates Natalie's by over 3 weeks. What's more, there's evidence the file was copied, and an email was altered to make it appear otherwise. Gasps. Whispered reactions. Natalie's face went pale. That's not true, she stammered. Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The evidence says otherwise. Janice. He turned to her. Now your failure to address this earlier allowed it to escalate. Janice froze. Her composure cracked under the weight of consequence. I didn't realize. But Julian was already moving on. Lena's design is approved, he said, turning back to her. And I want you leading the spring collection project. Lena blinked, stunned. The room dissolved into murmurs, but none of them mattered. She barely noticed when security escorted Janice from the building, or when Natalie slunk out behind her, eyes to the floor. All Lena could hear was the rush of breath finally returning to her chest. Later, she caught up to Julian in the hallway, her steps quick. You're the CEO? She asked, somewhere between amazement and something softer. Why didn't you say anything? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I wanted you to see me, not the title. You've got enough people judging you. I didn't want to be one more. She looked at him a long moment, then, no more secrets. Deal? He smiled, small and real. A real one this time? Deal. That evening, Lena offered to cook as a thank you. But Julian had other plans. My car's acting up, he said. Come with me? I could use a second pair of hands. They ended up parked on a quiet street near the edge of the city, beneath flickering street lamps and a sky slowly forgetting how to be blue. Julian popped the hood and frowned. You know anything about engines? Lena laughed. Only that they break when you really need them. She handed him tools, teasing him when he fumbled the wrench. You're hopeless, she said, gently nudging him aside. Let me try. They worked together clumsily, playfully, until grease marked their fingers and the engine sputtered back to life with a reluctant roar. Julian stepped back, grinning. Not bad, Carter. You're full of surprises. Lena wiped her hands on a rag, smiling back. Takes one to know one, Reeves. As they drove home, the city lights scattered across his windshield like stars caught mid-fall. She glanced sideways at him, heart oddly steady. She had knocked on his door as a stranger, but now, sitting beside him like this, she wasn't sure what they were anymore, only that something had shifted. He caught her gaze and raised an eyebrow. What's that smile for? She shrugged. Just thinking, you're not the worst neighbor. He chuckled, and for a moment, it all felt right, simple, safe. But somewhere behind office walls, whispers had begun to stir again, like storm clouds gathering on a too quiet sky. And Lena, though stronger now, had no idea how much more her heart was about to be asked to carry. Lena never thought she'd be back here, sitting across from the very people who had once stripped her of everything she held dear. But Julian had made it possible. He'd tracked down the paper trail, connected the dots no one else had bothered to follow, and handed her the truth wrapped in proof. You ready? He asked quietly, his hand resting lightly beside hers. Her stomach twisted. As ready as I'll ever be. I just want it over. Julian met her gaze. Steady? Sure. You're not walking in there alone. Let's take back what's yours. They followed their lawyer, a composed, razor-sharp woman named Ms. Carter, into a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the city. But Lena barely noticed the view. What she saw was them. Thomas and Kira Reeves, her stepfather and his daughter. The people who had taken her family's legacy and buried it beneath lies and polished smiles. Thomas reclined in his chair, gray at the temples, smugness seeping from every line on his face. Kira scrolled on her phone, uninterested, unreadable. Ms. Carter didn't waste time. Mr. Reeves. Miss Reeves. We have documented evidence of unauthorized transactions, money diverted from the Carter Trust, intended for Lena's inheritance. She slid a stack of papers across the table, signed the documents. Return control of the company shares, or we'll see you in court for fraud. Thomas let out a dry, empty laugh. You're bluffing. There's no proof. Julian stepped forward, voice like glass breaking. These are bank statements, wire transfers, emails, audited and verified. Kira looked up sharply. Dad, what is she talking about? Thomas's fingers trembled as he flipped through the pages. The color drained from his face. This is nonsense. Lena's voice cut through the room, soft but unshakable. You took everything. My dad's life work, our home. I was just a kid, and you left me with nothing. So now, I'm asking you to sign, to give back what was never yours to keep. Kira rolled her eyes. You don't deserve it. You were never meant for any of it. Julian's jaw clenched, his words calm but cold. Watch your words. Lena's worth more than either of you will ever understand. Thomas, now pale and defeated, picked up the pen and signed. His voice cracked as he mumbled an apology that didn't land. Kira signed too, eyes sharp with quiet rage, but she said nothing. Ms. Carter collected the documents, then turned to Lena with a nod. It's done. The shares are yours again. Congratulations. Lena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Relief washed over her like warm rain, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like something more fragile. Closure. She turned to Julian. Gratitude welled up in her chest. Thank you, she whispered. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. You did the hard part. That night, he took her to a barbecue joint tucked away in a lively corner of the city. Checkered tablecloths, the scent of smoked brisket, laughter spilling from open windows. Lena still felt like her body was catching up to what her soul had just survived. You didn't have to do all this, she said, poking at a plate of ribs and cornbread. Julian shrugged, a playful gleam in his eyes. You deserved a celebration. And I'm starving. Also, you're not cooking. She laughed, a real one, light and full, the kind that hadn't come easily in a long time. They talked between bites, letting the world blur into background noise. Lena found herself saying things she hadn't planned to say. I've got the company backed, but what if I'm not ready? What if I mess it up? What if I'm not enough? She didn't finish the last question, the one that scared her most. Julian leaned in, his voice quiet but unwavering. For what? For me, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Lena, you are more than enough. You've always been. Her heart swelled with hope, with doubt, with the terrifying beauty of being seen, and yet the peace wouldn't last long. The next day at Eclipse Atelier. A shadow spread through the halls before Lena even entered the room. People looked at her differently. Quiet stares, half whispers. By lunchtime, the rumor found her. Someone had accused her of an inappropriate relationship with a college professor, a scandal from years ago that had never existed, now resurfaced like rot beneath polished floors. Her breath caught. She knew exactly who was behind it, Victoria Lane. The message had been sent anonymously, but its intention was anything but subtle. Whispers swirled at Eclipse Atelier, a scandal, an accusation, something from Lena's past that had never existed, now dragged into the light by someone who wanted her dimmed. She traced the lie to its source, Victoria Lane, a former partner from Julian's business circle, the woman in red, with the calculating smile and eyes that never softened. Lena asked to meet her, choosing a quiet corner of a neighborhood cafe, one with low music and honest coffee. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late, dressed flawlessly, her latte already stirred. Lena didn't waste time. Her voice was calm. but her hands were clenched beneath the table. Why are you doing this? I've never done anything to you. Victoria smiled without warmth. You're in my way. Julian is distracted, and I don't lose to girls like you. Lena stood. Her heart thundered, but her voice held. He's not something to win, and I'm not someone you can push aside. She walked away, not triumphant, but resolved. Her name had been tarnished, but her truth untouched. That evening, she paced Julian's apartment, trying to make sense of the weight pressing on her chest. She's lying, Lena said, her voice breaking. I worked hard. I had top grades. There was never anything inappropriate, just a rumor from someone who didn't like me. Julian's expression darkened. She's playing dirty. I'll take care of it. And he did. He made calls, traced the origin of the rumor, found the professor at the center of the false story, now retired, who confirmed it had been a misunderstanding, planted years ago by a jealous classmate. Julian drafted a formal statement, shared it with the company's internal team, and just like that, the shadow receded. Victoria's contract was terminated, her name scrubbed from any future collaborations, her intentions laid bare. When Lena saw the email, her breath caught. You did all that? For me? She asked. Julian didn't hesitate. No one comes for you on my watch. Later that night, they sat on his balcony. The city stretched out below them, flickering lights, invisible stories, people moving through their own invisible battles. Lena's voice was soft. I like you, Julian. I do, but I'm scared. She hesitated, then went on. You're a CEO. You've got everything figured out. And me? I'm just learning how to stand. He reached for her hand, warm and certain. I don't care about titles, he said. I care about you. The woman who keeps showing up, even when everything tells her not to. A silence passed, not awkward, but sacred. Then he whispered, Let me show you what it means to stay. The next morning, he suggested a walk. No expectations. Just fresh air and a chance to breathe. As they strolled through sunlit streets, Lena's phone buzzed. A new message from Eclipse Atelier. She opened it. A promotion. Creative lead on the spring collection. Her vision finally seen. She smiled to herself, her steps a little lighter. But even as sunlight warmed her skin, a new weight began to form. Later that evening, she stood outside a grand Pacific Heights home, its stone pillars and iron gates casting long shadows across the driveway. It had been months since she first knocked on Julian's door, and now she was about to meet the people who had shaped him. You okay? Julian asked, stepping beside her. Lena smoothed the fabric of her dress, navy blue, stitched by her own hands. What if they don't like me? Julian reached for her hand, his voice steady. Be yourself. That's more than enough. They stepped through the gates, greeted by twinkling string lights and laughter drifting from the garden. At the center stood Eleanor Gray, Julian's grandmother. Regal, poised, with eyes like mirrors and a presence that asked questions before words were spoken. She embraced Julian, then turned to Lena. So, you're the one he's been talking about. Lena offered her hand. Lena Carter. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Gray. I've admired your work, especially your support for local shelters. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You've done your homework. Lena smiled. No, I've lived parts of it. Eleanor folded her hands. Tell me then, why are you here tonight? Lena paused. Then, with a breath drawn from memory and belief, she answered, Because I believe in giving back. I've had hard seasons, the kind that make you question your place in the world. But I'm learning that healing comes when you stop running and start reaching. Eleanor studied her, and in that moment, Lena didn't flinch. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just trying to be real. I want to help others find their way. That's what Lena said when Eleanor Gray Regal, discerning, impossibly elegant, asked why she was here. Not just at the event, but in this world Julian belonged to. A world of legacy and status. Eleanor studied her a moment longer, then gestured toward a nearby booth. We're short-staffed at the sustainable fashion display. Care to pitch in? Lena didn't hesitate. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work sorting donations, chatting with guests about repurposed materials and ethical design. Her eyes lit up when she spoke of giving old things new life. Her hands moved with purpose. For her purpose, her laughter soft but genuine. Even Eleanor noticed. Later, Lena pitched an idea, a pop-up runway show with volunteers modeling the refurbished pieces. She rallied a team, rearranged the space, and turned donated clothes into a statement of art and resilience. The crowd applauded, not because it was perfect, but because it was alive. As the event drew to a close and the lights dimmed, Eleanor pulled her aside. That was impressive, she said, but I need to know, what drives you? Are you with my grandson because of him, or the life he can offer you? Lena didn't flinch. I love Julian for who he is, not for his title or the world he lives in. When I had nothing, he didn't look away. He didn't fix me. He saw me. I'd choose him even if he had nothing. Eleanor's expression softened, her eyes a little less guarded. I believe you, she said. I was testing you tonight, and you passed. Welcome to the family. Lena's throat tightened. Gratitude welled up, warm and overwhelming. From across the garden, Julian caught her eye and smiled. Told you she was special, Grandma. The next morning, as sunlight painted the city in soft gold, Julian drove Lena to Eclipse Atelier. She hadn't expected anything unusual, but what awaited her changed everything. An email from a former professor, Dr. Larson, had been sent to the entire design team. Years ago, a false rumor was spread about Lena Carter's academic integrity. I'm writing to correct the record. The rumor was baseless, born of jealousy. Lena earned her honors through diligence, talent, and character. My deepest apologies for the harm done. She stared at the screen. Her breath caught. Then, slowly, the knot in her chest loosened. Around her, coworkers nodded small, silent gestures of respect. The shadows cast by Victoria's lies began to dissolve. Janice was gone. Natalie, under review. And Lena's project, the spring collection, was gaining real momentum. She threw herself into the work, her sketches bolder, her vision sharper. It was as if, for the first time, the world had stepped back and let her take up space. That evening, Julian picked her up, insisting they take a drive. They ended up at Presidio Park, the sun dipping low, painting the sky in shades of rose and fire. The Golden Gate Bridge stood in the distance like a promise. They walked slowly along a quiet path, eucalyptus leaves whispering in the breeze. Lena felt different, lighter, as if she'd finally stepped out from behind the version of herself the world had tried to shrink. Julian stopped near a lookout point, the horizon stretching wide behind him. His voice was quiet, steady. These past months. They've changed me, he said. I've built companies, made deals. But none of it means anything without you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a simple silver ring. Elegant, honest, timeless. Lena Carter, he said, will you marry me? She didn't speak right away. She couldn't. Her heart felt too full. But her answer had been there all along, written into every late-night sketch, every quiet moment on his couch, every time he showed up not to save her, but to stand beside her. Yes, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, the city glowing below them like a blessing. They sat on a nearby bench, giddy and breathless, talking about everything and nothing, a small wedding, maybe a vineyard, maybe just a garden, and people who mattered. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice teasing but sincere. I'm not quitting my job, you know. I want to build something that's mine, not just lean on what's already yours. Julian laughed, gently brushing a hand down her arm. I wouldn't have it any other way. You're going to change the fashion world, Lena, and I'll be right there, cheering you on. She smiled not because she was in love, not because her name was finally being recognized, but because she believed it. Her life, once locked behind a door, was now wide open, and she was finally walking through. A week later, Lena returned to the grand house in Pacific Heights, not as a stranger, not as someone proving her worth, but as someone already welcome. Julian's parents greeted her with warmth that didn't need performance. His mother, Linda, wrapped her in a hug that said, "You're already family. We've heard all about you," she said. "You're exactly what Julian needed, someone who stands her ground." His father, Robert, chuckled and added with a wink, "Just don't let him think he's always right." Julian groaned. Lena laughed, and somewhere in that laughter, she felt something settle in her chest, like home. Later, as dessert was served and string lights swayed gently in the breeze, Eleanor raised her glass. "To Lena," she said, her voice clear and sure, "for bringing light to our family. And to love the kind that finds us when we've stopped looking." Glasses clinked. Lena caught Julian's eyes across the table. He mouthed, "I love you," and she mouthed it back, her heart full. As they left the mansion hand in hand, stars scattered over the San Francisco sky, Lena looked up. She remembered the night she was locked out of her apartment, out of her own life. And now she was unlocking something greater than she'd ever imagined. She wasn't just in love. She was free, seen, home. Their story wasn't ending here. It was beginning bold and imperfect, full of promise. Lena Carter, the girl who once stood outside a door with nowhere to go, had become a woman who built her own way forward. She didn't just find romance. She reclaimed her story. She walked into Eclipse Atelier as an underdog, survived envy, doubt, sabotage, but she stayed. She rose. The designs she sketched weren't just for fashion, they were quiet revolutions. Testaments to a girl who never stopped dreaming, even when the world told her to sit down. Her past was stolen, but she took it back, not with vengeance, but with grace, with the courage of someone who knows her worth. And Julian, the man who opened the door that night, didn't win her heart with titles or wealth. He won it by showing up, over and over, for the messy moments, the quiet ones, the ones no one else sees. Together, they remind us, life may close doors, but love, real love, opens them. If you're still here, listening to this story, thank you. Thank you for making space in your heart for Lena and Julian, for believing in the quiet victories, the second chances, and the strength it takes to simply keep going. Maybe you've had days like hers when the world felt locked, and you didn't know if you had the key, but you do. Maybe you've met someone like Julian, someone who didn't try to fix you, but stood beside you without asking you to shrink. Or maybe you are that someone for someone else. Wherever you are on your journey, know this. You are enough, you are seen, and your story is still being written. Thank you for being here, for listening, for feeling. And if this story touched something in you, we'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts, your favorite moment, or the time you found a door that finally opened. Until the next story, stay soft, stay strong, and never stop believing in your own light.